the compound. The rest is the SS part of the camp that went all the way around the prisoner compound, and it shows the administrative building and the sleeping quarters, the warehouses, all of the facilities that went into the rest of the camp, which was approximately 6 to 8 times larger than just the prisoner compound. You can see the barracks we have left. And we were standing, we came in about my side gate right there.
Tell us about the gardens that they had here at the camp.
All right, up at the upper end, the top of that, just below that top red line, was what they call a plantage. And this was an area where they, up on the far side here, where they had vegetable gardens that they forced, the SS forced the prisoners to grow, certain ones. And the prisoners could have vegetables right in their bare hands, and yet they were not allowed to ever take a bite of any vegetable. They had to produce them for the SS troopers only, and yet they were starving to death. And this is part of the mental torture. Now there was another area outside the camp that was a big farming area, where the SS had developed a business of growing herbs, and they wanted to try to corner the European market of herbs. And they used the prisoners in this compound to grow all these herbs and so on. And they also had a second detail of artists who would take and actually paint the herbs constantly, and that was the only mission or job as a prisoner, was to paint the pictures of the herbs, perhaps for advertising reasons for the SS prisoners and so on.
Now, was this herb business part of a military operation, or was it a black market operation, you know?
It was a business operation, and there were all kinds of business operations that took place within the SS part of the camp, where there were all kinds of factories. There were clothing factories and shoe factories. They had special goldsmiths working there, and the SS utilized all of these facilities for their own means. And also it was a way of having money and goods go through the camp, because there was concentrating going on between the prisoners that knew how to deal with the SS and the SS. And it was close enough to the town of Dachau and Munich so that the SS could take orders and have them manufactured and then delivered. So that it was a business proposition. Not have to do with the camp only, but if you knew your way around, you could get anything you wanted in Dachau, including a counter-penicillin.
Now,
that would depend on what category of prisoner you were. There was a caste system. The lowest ring on the ladder was for the Jews and some gypsies. Above them were the Slavs and then the Poles. And it depended on what job you had and what category you were in. But among the Jews, who were in the lowest levels, they got about 2 to 250 calories a day. That was their subsistence
At the most.
at the most.
And usually, very often the food was even putrid.
yeah.
So that it gave them dysentery, and that was one of the worst diseases in most of the camps. They killed most of the people because they got no medicine for the dysentery and so on, and the sanitation was absolutely at its minimum, especially toward the end, so that there was human waste all over the place, and the disease was spreading everywhere and giving more and more people the dysentery and so on, which just made them, according to the German soldiers, made the prisoners that much more miserable. And of course, as I say, the majority of the people died from dysentery. There was typhus and many other diseases spreading here, especially toward the end. But the food was at an absolute minimum. And the Germans had calculated that the prisoners could live so many days on so much food, so that they knew in so many days that so many prisoners would die. And then they already had more new prisoners come in to replace them. It was quite a methodical operation all the way around the globe.
Go. This is the B watchtower, and this was where somebody shot at some of the prisoners in the compound. Unarmed prisoners, it was all over. Somebody shot and killed one of the prisoners, and that's what set the Americans off. And the Americans then wiped out all of the Germans that were in the tower up here. And some of those Germans, I don't know how they ended up, but they ended up in the water outside in the river. And there are very, very famous pictures of American GIs as well as some of the survivors taking the bodies out of the river. And it all happened right at this tower, and Lyndon, who was coming in through the gate over there at the where we just came through before, heard this shooting going on. They had no idea that and just a little further to the in this direction, the members of the 45th Division were coming in. They were sweeping in through the SS camp. And so that's why there was this big controversy of which particular group got to Dachau and liberated it first.
Okay, say that again.
All right, these were the actual barracks areas. These were the actual foundations, the concrete foundations to hold up the barracks and so on of all the 33,000 prisoners in the buildings. But through the years, they were falling apart and rotting and so on. So they finally, the International Committee decided to tear down the barracks and just leave the foundations here and put one building up to represent the actual barracks and what they were like at that time. But they just took down the rest of them because there was no point to keeping them. The people, souvenir hunters and everything else were tearing them apart. We're going to enter the crematoria and so on, but it's a very important fact that this opening, this bridge, did not exist then. It was all sealed off in the days that the camp was here, so that the crematoria itself was totally camouflaged by the woods. The prisoners in the compound here did not know the crematoria was over there. In order to get there, they took prisoners out of the camp, took them all the way down to the end of the camp, and came up the other side when they were bringing victims to be so-called fumigated or otherwise, and take them all the way into the secret woods and into the crematoria, and then dispose of them there, and the wagons full of bodies and so on.
The only workers from the camp who knew about the crematory and the gas chamber were ones that worked in that particular commando. Commando was an outside work unit. Other than that, electricians or plumbers, people who did the gas work, they got there. This part over here, incidentally, shows very vividly that the moat is inside the camp. Where we showed you the water before, the river was outside the camp. And you can see this moat, and this moat went all the way around the camp. It doesn't exist in most other parts, but you see it well from here now. This moat was filled with water, by the way.
At times.
Then start by saying, now we're inside the gate, towards the
I don't
crematory.
know if there was a gate here. This is the area. This is the area where that is heavily treed and bushed area is the area where the crematoria was hidden from any members that were in the camp. Nobody could see what was going on here. The crematoria and the gas chamber existed in this area, and many people from the camp here they just didn't know about it.
Just a minute, please.
Okay.
Okay, say that again.
I don't know who did this particular statue, but it is the symbol of Dachau, a prisoner of Dachau.
Okay.
All right, this is a controversial area that the revisionists and deniers bring up. This was where the disinfection area was. where they would take the clothing off many of the prisoners and put them in there, and then they would so-called sterilize and so on. The deniers use this to say that they didn't kill any of the people in mass, kill them here, but they were actually just disinfecting the clothing, which is only partial truth to what actually happened here.
These were fumigation chambers for clothing. Nobody says it didn't happen, that's what happened, but the deniers, the people that say the Holocaust was a hoax, they claim that this is what were the gas chambers, and it's not true.
It's not true.
Disease was rampant, vermin were rampant, all kinds of lice.
In particular lice.
So every 2 weeks or something, they used to disinfect their clothing, which is what they did. There was no doubt about that.
But in many of the other camps that I was in up north, that they had a great habit, even in some of the stalags, of disinfecting with very powerful chemicals.
Yes.
The clothing. They gassed the clothing. And then they would immediately force the prisoners to put the clothing on them. And thus the chemicals would attack their bodies and go through their bloodstreams and so on, and kill them in that manner there. But of course they didn't speak about that. Not only if they survived, of course they were in horrible condition from burning from the chemicals. This happened in many camps such as Hammelburg, Stalag.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, this is what the men of the 42nd and 45th Division found when they came into this room. Stacks of bodies like this. And reminded me of many camps such as Hadamar in particular that I was in, and they're so vivid in my mind. Is coming to a room in Hadamar where all the bodies were thrown all over the floor, except in my camp there was no clothing on the people. But the odor was so overwhelming up at that particular place when the rotting bodies had been there on the far wall in that particular camp was a whole battery of ovens all on fire, and they were burning the bodies in there at that particular point. So the odor in there was just absolutely overwhelming. We had to almost hop over our faces so that we could breathe. But to see this emotional shock of hundreds of bodies being thrown on the floor to be disposed of as they could in the oven was just an incredible shock to the mind here. At Hadamar, of course, we found the shower room where they were actually gassing with monoxide poison many of the people, but they couldn't kill the people fast enough. So that the doctors and the nurses upstairs in the hospital were actually injecting gasoline or morphine, high doses into the artery of men, women, children, and even babies in that hospital to eliminate them. And then bring them downstairs and throw on top of each other to be disposed of later.
And the crazy thing is that they kept it up until the last minute. The war was over. Everybody knew it was over. But they kept on burning, killing till the last minute.
Do you think they were trying to destroy the evidence?
Yeah, in many camps, that's exactly what they were trying to do, was to eliminate the evidence. They, in certain camps that we were in, that they were trying to have them again. They had so many bodies that they were putting them in big holes behind the hospital and trying to bury them. When the American Army came in and found all of this, then we forced the German people to dig up all the bodies in the mass grave and properly plant them to say in honorable individual grave. There's one whole graveyard behind Hadamar that contains nothing but little children and babies. And then there were many other graveyards for the adults from different nations and so on, properly buried with respect.
Bodies that were found in Dachau, laying all around the camp, when the Americans came, they forced the townspeople, they put them on wagons, horse-drawn wagons, and they took them up to the other side of the camp, the other part of the SS camp, up the hill, and they buried them with markers indicating how many bodies were in each of those particular mass graves. And the Italians built a monastery up there, which we visited.
Now, I met here, I met in California, Shawnee Bond and Sherry Bond. Shawnee was a Jew. In the day before liberation on the 20th of April, the SS took most of the Jews in camp and took them up to a forest nearby. And then they had German guys up on the platforms in the trees, they had machine guns all around this little forest area, and they machine gunned every one of the Jews. Shawnee Bond was shot right through the chest, but he managed to have to be the only one that survived. But you can describe what they did to the Russians here in this camp.
The Russians, they did two things. First of all, right behind the Spring Victoria area was a little slopey kind of a hill, and they would make the Russians kneel down, and they would just put a gun in the back of their head and shoot them right on the spot. They don't know how many of them were killed there, because they didn't count the Russians in the numbers of prisoners in the camp. Then they had another area in the SS part of the camp, the training area, where they would let the Russians run to go ahead and try to escape, and got into their machine guns, and they used them for target practice. And they had two tremendous ramps where the Russians would run, trying to get away, because they could never get away. This was part of the German soldiers. They just rolled down, and we visited that area as well. But that's far away.
And then in this area, waiting for the Russians, then they took them, there were so many Russians here, and so much great hatred for the Russians, that they took them up to the rifle range. And there they killed thousands of Russians in that area, very nearby there. It was a mad world over here at that time. And it's very hard for us today to understand that kind of a mind of how they could exterminate, to kill people simply because in their minds they were different.
The one was to try and eliminate all evidence of any kind of camp, even in Dachau. There were three separate orders. One was to mine the camp and blow it all up. Another one was to bomb it from the air, but they didn't even have bombs for their planes to use. And the third order, which the prisoners who worked in the offices were able to get these orders, so they knew they existed, was to bring in some chemicals from a plane of immunity and to feed it to the prisoners in their soup. And the idea was to kill off everybody with that one meal. But for some reason or other, the poison never got here and was never used. Prisoners knew about it. And there had been an International Prisoners Committee organized to counter whatever orders the Germans gave to eliminate the camp. And even when they had roll calls to start another forced march, they wouldn't line up on the parade grounds when we were just standing. They wouldn't line up. And so there was confusion again, and then sudden Allied air raids, and then those forced marches never took place the last day or so.
Okay, we'll conclude.
Yeah, we're standing now in a room where the prisoners were told to come in and get undressed, and then we would be led into the shower room where there would be nice soap and hot water where they could take showers. In effect, of course, it was the gas chamber. And even to the last minute, many prisoners who knew about the gas chambers and everything else, they deluded themselves. They didn't believe that the Germans could do such things. And so they went in like shit. Spewed out gas. And there was no way out, so that door there and this door here, no way out, nothing. And so they climbed the walls and they did what people do, you know, with life, where they knew that it was going out, and they heard the gas coming.
But it is very controversial in this particular gas chamber that they have no actual proof that the gas chambers were used here at Dachau, and so there becomes a controversy between the revisionists and the historians. And at this point, they will not admit that there was people gassed in this room because they don't have any eyewitnesses that survived.
They do have one eyewitness, Dr. Block, maybe like Auschwitz or the extermination camp, but that it was used. They have some evidence that shows that it was used for experimental purposes, etc. Not for millions of people, but for who knows how many. There's a French chemical engineer report that says it was used. The American first OSS that came in says it was used. Yet the first Germans said that no, it was never used, and so they keep to that story. We don't know what the real facts are as yet. The verdict is not in on whether that was used, although officially they claim it was not used.
So your group of historians is encountering quite a bit of obfuscation about that.
There is no controversy on Hadamar. It's been proven beyond any doubt that the gas chambers have been used for a great length of time. And of course we have my men where I live and eyewitnesses to the bodies, to the gas chambers, and to the crematorium and so on at Hadamar. But it's very controversial here at Dhaka.
So there's no way of knowing the numbers of people
That were gassed here?
were gassed.
Not here. But what happens is the deniers, the people that claim that the Holocaust didn't take place, they take words of historians and twist them. And if they say that, for instance, what's the guy, the museum in Los Angeles,
Now I can't think.
Wiesenthal said, he made a statement that there were no gas chambers in Germany. So as a result, the deniers say there were no gas chambers, even the Jew admits it. What that means is the extermination camps that the Germans established were not set up on German soil. They were set up in Poland, they were set up in Russia, in the Ukraine, they were set up in Croatia, they were set up. The German people, they didn't even think would stand for the idea of these mass executions. Whether or not they would or not, we don't know. But we do know that the extermination camps, and Dachau was not an extermination camp. Dachau was a work camp. There's a main difference there. And so these people throw them all together, so even the Jews admit that there were no extermination camps in Germany.
Except for Hadamar.
Hadamar was an extermination camp, but most people have never heard of Hadamar.
But the revisionists try to say this was simply a shower room.
Right.
And since when is a shower room actually used? And as Hans was describing the other day, that this particular middle set actually had some of the ashes still here, but they've now taken them out. At Hadamar, the ovens were very different from these brick ones. They were a whole battery of solid wall. And as I mentioned before, we walked in and stood there, and I looked in the doors of the oven and looked at the bodies all being burned, and of course the odor was absolutely incredible in the room. From the outside, when we were approaching Hadamar, we could see the big smokestack up above and the brownish dark smoke covering the city, and the odor from that was absolutely overwhelming there.
And with this kind of an odor, the people were in denial.
And in denial. And you could smell this place 10, 15, 20 miles away.
They would hang the prisoners from here. See these rafters here? And they were hooked there. They would hang these guys just to torture them a little more before they burnt them up.
Before they killed them. Just so they could watch what was going to be done to them.
This series of 4 ovens, when you see them like these with these double doors, this is specifically Dachau. Some of the other camps had different kinds of ovens where they had single doors, and in Auschwitz they had 10 of these ovens lined up, because they had a lot more action there.
And Buchenwald, the ovens were in sets of 3. A battery of 3 here, a battery of 3 there, a battery of 3 there. But even the historians would count them as one oven, just for calculation purposes. But they were batteries of 3 at a time. So they could eliminate an awful lot of bodies there.
This is the wrap-up, David.
Okay, tell me where I'm at.
You're in the barracks of the prisoners in the Dachau concentration camp. And over here they have a setup to show you how the bunks are set up and everything, and how many tiers there were. In this particular barracks, there were 3 tiers, and the barracks were originally built to house about 200 people, and they have as many as 1,200 in there. So they had 4 people sleeping in the space of 1 person. They had to sleep head to toe and toe to head, and they couldn't even turn over. If one turned over, all 4 had to turn over. And that was a typical cell block.
Now these barracks, these bunks that I see here, in comparison to what I saw like at Mura, much better built than at Mura. And in Mura, what I found was very different, that they made all the prisoners sleep across these bunks, as close or as tight as they could get them. And then they chained everyone at the ankle with a big like logging chain. Every one of them into the bunks in 2 of the barracks that we went into. And then they shut off all food and water and starved people to death. They were already starved.
There's other places where you get better pictures, David. There's other barracks that are wide open there.
So every camp was very different, and also as for the conditions, the punishment types, and so on. There was no standard system. Here we have toilets, I see, in this particular barrack. At Mura, they use slip trenches out in the yard. Trench probably about a foot wide, and that's all they had for toilets there. So it's very, very different in Mura.
This is a day room that was set up at the beginning where each prisoner had a locker and they had a place to sit down. But part of the criticism of what they did with these barracks is they sanitized them and made them look like a Boy Scout camp or something, and this was very, very far from what they were really like.
At Dachau 3B,
as being shown in different sub-camps of the major camps. For instance, Flossenburg, Theresites, Sundal, Bergen-Belsen, and in Dachau, you see where there's a black dot that shows the net of the sub-camps. Now, in the Museum of History at the Army in Washington, they have a map showing in Germany there were 1,000 concentration camps of various sizes, and in all of Europe, 5,000 concentration camps. And this kind of map gives you a good idea of what that looks like. This is just Germany.
when you take this sub-camp here, Mura, where I was, there were 10 Muras. So that was only a main camp of resistance.